Welcome to the Eurostep Brit podcast.
Game's going to be decided here. Harold spots up. Doesn't go. Putback is good! Roberto Canada with a second chance opportunity. Aris lead. Per Gunther for three. Got it. Per Gunther, drei Punkte. Courage inside. For Gordon for the dunk. Ball game.
Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Eurostep Brit podcast. We'll call this one 2001, A Billy Mims Odyssey. Well, it's been a few weeks, but we're back. Billy Mims is best known here in the UK for his time with the London Leopards and Leicester Riders. After 2 decades as the head coach of Florida Tech, Billy decided to step down in March. So, we'll take a look at Billy's future plans, and of course, we'll talk London, Leicester, and the time he ended up coaching in Ireland. It's a nice long episode, so without further ado, let's get to it.
Billy, welcome to the podcast. It's great to get you on. I think the last time I saw you probably would have been at one of the BBL playoff finals in London a few years ago, wouldn't it?
That's right. We did bump into each other. I was there for the London Lions and Leicester Riders, two clubs that I had a very close link to. Former coach of the Leicester Riders, and Robert Youngblood was sitting on the bench of the London Lions as an assistant coach. So my wife and I happened to be in the UK at the time, and loved taking in the BBL finals there at the O2 and all the great atmosphere.
We'll start, because normally I like to go through chronologically through someone's career, but I thought we'll start with the news that came out in March that after 2 decades, you decided to step down at Florida Tech. Tell us all about it.
Well, there's been a lot of changes in college athletics, and I'm not the first one to do so, but the game has changed an awful lot over here. And at the various levels, it's hard. I guess it's hard, so I'll try to explain it as best I can. We have something over here now called name, image, and likeness, NIL. And then we also have something called the transfer portal. Now, I'm sure people back in England, in the UK, and anywhere else in Europe that might be able to listen to your podcast will say, we've had the transfer portal for years in soccer, football. And it's a little bit different here. Basically, it's changed the whole makeup of what collegiate sports used to be. Collegiate sports was all about taking people 18 to 22 years of age, getting them an education and allowing sports, basketball, football, tennis, golf, whatever, to be the way for them to that education and to get that education paid for via means of a scholarship. But now it's all changed. Now they're saying the scholarship isn't enough, that players deserve to be paid part of the so to speak, profits that the university makes off sports. But now, to be realistic, very few colleges in the United States make any money off sports. It looks like it because of television, media, marketing, the big arenas, March Madness, the college football playoffs. It looks like there's this really amazing amount of money that's involved. And there's a lot of money involved, but it really doesn't fund everything the way that people think it does. So from that, now the problem is every player you recruit now, I don't care what level you're at, the first question they ask is, well, how much money can I make? And that changes the whole dynamic of college sports. And then on top of that is the transfer portal, which every year now, when the season finishes, you have to recruit your own players first, because it used to be a rule that if you play for one college, that you would have to stay at that college. But if you decided to transfer, you'd have to sit out a year at the new college you go to. The transfer portal has changed all that. Now players can enter the portal every year. They can transfer without any penalties and play right away. So what you're seeing a lot of is players that are now playing every year of their college career, 4 years, at, say, 4 different schools. So you're having transfers constantly. And right now, Niall, I checked last night, in the current transfer portal right now, there are over 4,000 players in the transfer portal. There are not 4,000 available spots in the NCAA or, college basketball for those kids to go play in. So a lot of kids that go into the transfer portal won't even come out of it with a position on a team at another university. They will fail in their efforts to transfer. So it's really the wild, wild west right now, because players can do whatever they want. Agents can pay players. Schools are about to be able to pay players themselves. We're not even sure. It's opened so many cans of worms, right? There's a problem with international visas for international kids coming in who've always been on F1 visas. Well, F1 visas mean you're only allowed to work on campus, right? Not off campus. So as an athlete, how does that work? If you're only allowed to work on campus, then you can't get paid multi-millions of dollars from a local NIL company, because that would be working off campus. So there's a problem with that. The universities don't want student athletes to become employees of the university. There's a problem with that. So right now it is really a mess. And not just myself, but a lot of other coaches. I've been at one school for 20 years, showing my loyalty to the university and loyalty to the young men that I brought in, with the hope of getting them a quality college education and a kickstart in life. And now all that's changed. And so my feeling is, look, I didn't coach for the past 20 years at what we call a Power 4 big time Division I program that has a ton of money. So therefore I'm trying to compete against people who are paying players when I can't pay players. And that makes winning and success a lot more difficult. So the level playing field is really out the door right now. And it's just not the environment that I wanted to stay in. So my feeling was that it's a great time. All 3 of my children are fully grown now. My wife and I are virtually empty nesters. And it's a great time to go back doing what I really loved. I spent 12 years in the UK coaching 2 franchises, 2 professional basketball success. And now to this day, those are the 12 happiest years of my life. So it's an opportunity for my wife and I again to go back overseas, to see the world. And if I'm going to be paying players or have to pay players to win games, then I might as well truly be coaching professional basketball, because that's what college basketball has become. But everybody collegiately can't pay those players what it takes to succeed. So I think it's a great time for me to get out of college basketball and back overseas coaching the professional game, something I had great success at and something I enjoyed doing for a very large portion of my career.
Of course, you mentioned coaching in the UK, but of course you coached in Ireland as well for a little bit. Where would you like to coach again? I mean, obviously, would you like to come back to the UK if an opportunity came up, or would you like to try somewhere else in Europe or even somewhere else around the world?
That's a great question, Alan. I've traveled. Basketball has been my ticket to see the world. Over the past few years, almost every summer, I've been going to Greece. I've been speaking at coaching clinics and world championship and European champion events that have been aligned with FIBA. So I was in Athens, Greece. I was in Heraklion, Crete. I'm getting quite well known there. A few people told me I should run for the mayor of Heraklion. But my wife and I enjoy that part of the world, and we've got some great friendships developed there. Last summer, I was in Lithuania with the Lithuanian Basketball Federation. They invited myself and a very famous gentleman named Don Showalter, who works for USA Basketball. Don and I were the lead speakers on a clinic run by the Lithuanian Basketball Federation that was held in conjunction with the under 20 European Women's Championship. Got to witness courtside Spain versus France in a fantastic women's final. So, I've been enjoying traveling the world in the summers ever since I spent my time as a pro coach in the UK. Even every summer, I've gone back to Europe, coaching in camps and clinics, and just letting basketball continue to be my ticket to see the world, and develop great relationships, great friendships. And I enjoy watching basketball worldwide, not just watching the game in America as I grew up watching, but now since I've gone overseas and coached overseas professionally, I really enjoy watching the international game as well. So England is always a second home for me and my wife. My wife is from Kent. All three of my children were born in England. My entire family carries British passports, and I have British residency. So we still own property in the UK. We have family and tons of friends there. So the UK holds a special place in my heart. I'm a big fan of what was the BBL, which is now the SLB, and I know that is even going through potential changes as well. But yes, if there was an opportunity to come back to England, to be closer to family and friends there, and to be a part of professional basketball in the UK, I would certainly consider that. I still have a lot of good friends coaching in the UK in the SLB. I know a lot of the owners there, and just a lot of friendships with fans and people that follow and support the game of basketball. So the UK is always very high on my list of places to live and work. And at the moment, I'm talking to one of the top professional clubs in Greece. We'll see how that goes. I'm talking to a couple of teams in Lithuania, talking to teams in Australia, also talking to teams in Luxembourg right now at the moment. So I'm one of those guys, have basketball, will travel. I love the rest of the world. Obviously I'm an American. I grew up, was born and raised here, but now that I've actually been around the world and seen the world, I see so much beauty in everywhere. And I'm so adaptable now that I think I can live and be happy anywhere. So again, UK, number one on my list, always will be. Had a great time living in Ireland as well when I coached over there. And right now I'm even looking into the Irish senior men's national job. So that is open at the moment. It's a part-time position, not a full-time position, but something I've always had an interest in. So who knows? I might be over there sooner than you know.
I first got to know you when you came to coach at the Leopards, but you'd coached in Ireland at Neptune. How did that come about? Because obviously you've been coaching in the college system,
right?
And then you get a chance to go to Ireland,
right? Well, that was kind of a funny story, but I was coaching at Winthrop University, which is now an NCAA Division I school. At the time that I was there, we were NAIA. We had just built a brand new arena. The university was growing. The sports program was growing. And I was the associate head basketball coach there, coaching under a legendary coach, Neil Gordon, NAIA Hall of Famer, and one of my great mentors in my career. Neil had this vision to take Winthrop overseas. So we did. We went to Ireland and played in the Roy Curtis tournament in Dublin, Ireland. And we took our team over to play and had a blast there in Dublin. It was a great tournament, great event, great opportunity for the players at Winthrop to see another part of the world. So we did it. And then we met some people there, some coaches, some friends. One of the folks we met was Paul Meany. And Paul Meany was the head of Marion Basketball Club in Dublin, Ireland. And Paul was also the president at the time of the Irish Basketball Association. And Paul then, after us going to the Roy Curtis in Dublin and meeting Paul then decided to bring Marion over to the U.S. and do a collegiate tour with Marion Basketball Club in America. So we hosted Paul Meany and Marion in Rock Hill, South Carolina, were the base for their U.S. collegiate tour. Well, funny enough, the coach who was going to coach the team on that tour, Fran Ryan, his wife was about to have a baby and seemed like that baby was coming a lot quicker than expected. So Paul Meany picked up the phone and said, Billy, can you get away from Winthrop and coach our Irish? And at that time, they had changed it from just Marion to an Irish all-star team on an 8-game U.S. collegiate tour against NCAA Division I and Division II teams. He asked me, could I coach the team? So I said, yes, I'd be happy to. So I coached the Irish All-Stars on that 8-game tour. We won 4, lost 4, which at that time, I believe was the most successful tour by an Irish team in the United States against U.S. colleges and universities. And so it was a great tour. I made a lot of friends on the tour. And about a month after the tour, the job opened up at Neptune in Cork, Ireland. And I got a phone call from someone in Cork saying, hey, one of our players here played for you on the Irish tour. And he said, you were a great coach and he had a fun playing for you. You did a great job. And our job's open. And we wondered if you'd like to be a head coach. At that point, I'd only ever been an assistant collegiate coach. So I thought, what a great opportunity to get my first feet wet, so to speak, as a head coach and to do it in Cork, Ireland. So I took the job, left Rock Hill, South Carolina, moved to Cork, had a great experience there, loved every minute of it. I only lived about 2 miles from Blarney Castle and even took American friends to visit the castle and kiss the Blarney Stone. But Niall, I have to say this, they would not let me kiss the Blarney Stone. When I went there with some American friends, there was an Irishman there who was trying to pretend he was a leprechaun, and he was guarding the stone, and he had a nice little blanket laid out there for people to lay on the stone at the top of the castle, lean back, and the Blarney Stone sits outside the top of the castle under a bit. So you lean back, reach up, kiss the stone, and then you're helped back onto your feet. So my friends did it one by one by one, and then I laid down to do it. And he said, no, you can't kiss the Blarney Stone. And I said, excuse me? What do you mean I can't kiss the Blarney Stone? I just brought all these Americans here to do that. And I live right down the road here. Why can't I kiss it? And he said, because, my friend, you already have the gift of gab.
Apart from that, how was your year in Ireland? Was it like, obviously, was it your first time living outside the States?
Yes, it was. I still remember, I lived at a little property on Sunday School Lane in Cork, Ireland. And I learned a lot of things that I never knew growing up. When I first got into the little, it was a 2 up, 2 down, I guess you call it terrace house there in Cork. And the very first day that I lived there, there was a knock on my door. And I said, wonder who that is. Somebody already knows I'm here. I went and opened the door, and it was a man carrying a sack on his back. And I had no idea what this was. And he said, where would you like your coal? And I said, excuse me? He said, coal. I'm bringing coal for your fire. I had no earthly idea how to start a coal fire, where to put the coal. He came in and said, we probably put it under the stairs here. So they went up and opened a door, and there was a cupboard under the stairs, and he stuck my sack of coal under there. And then I had to ask somebody to come around and show me how to start a fire with coal, because I'd never done that. So learned a lot of unique things in Ireland, but the people were great there. They treated me fantastic. They're such a friendly nation, friendly population. I loved every minute of it. I turned around a team that had always been a good team, but they were struggling. Neptune Basketball Club, when I got there, they were struggling. And we turned it around, and we won the National League Championship. We won the Irish Top Four, which is the playoffs at the end of the season. And we even won the local Cork County Board Championship. So we won 3 out of the 4 championships that we could have won that year. And we lost. We were runners-up in the ICS Cup final. And we hosted that on national television. Very disappointing. But that was sort of the first event we were in after I got there. And we were still building at that point. So we got to the Cup final, lost a very tight, close game, standing room only crowd. And then we continued to get better the rest of the season. So it was really an exciting first year for me there.
I want to take you forward to the Leopards. I heard this story a while back. I don't know if it's true or not. You'll obviously tell me. You were approached by the Leopards about a player, and you were trying to sell the player to that team. It didn't happen, but then they asked you to go interview for the job. Is that true?
That is correct. I had a player. I was coaching in Miami, and I was at Barry University, a very good Division II program that I had virtually just built from scratch myself there. And I was in my 6th year at Barry University, and we'd just come off playing for the Sunshine State Conference Championship. And I had our very first NCAA All-American, an outstanding player from New York City named Anthel Hicks. And as any good coach would do, Niall, any good college coach would do, I got this phone call out of the blue from a guy named Barry Dow, who was the general manager of a brand new club starting in London, England, called the London Leopards. They were going to be playing in East London in the Docklands, and they were looking for players. And they saw this thing about this Division II NCAA first team All-American, USA Today, first team All-American. So he called me to find out about Anthel Hicks. They were interested in bringing him over as their first American player. So I spent probably 6 hours on the phone that day. When I got off the phone with Barry, I faxed him. That was back before we were emailing documents all over the world. So I faxed him every newspaper article possible, every statistic possible, every newspaper photograph possible of Anthel Hicks to sell my player to the London Leopards. And Barry said he'd call me the next day after going through all the material. So the next day I was eagerly awaiting the phone call, and I got the call from Barry Dow. And unfortunately on the call, Barry said, "Billy, we really like your player Anthel Hicks, but we want to go with something a little bit more experienced. And we have a shot at a player that has been an all-conference, all-league player. He's a veteran, and he's now available, and we're going to go after him." And believe it or not, the player they were going after, we never actually got. They were going after Colin Irish at the time.
All right.
And it never worked out. We never got Colin. But he said, "But even though we're going to go after this veteran player, I've really enjoyed talking to you the last 2 days. We'd like to interview you for the head coaching job." I said, "What?" And I was running a basketball camp in Miami at the time. I said, "I can't go right now. I've got 200 kids in my gym. I'm running a summer basketball camp." He said, "When does camp finish?" I said, 5 o'clock on Friday. He said, "Great. There's a flight on Virgin Atlantic out of Miami International to London, England, 7:30 Friday night. We'll have you a ticket on it." I flew to London. It was a whirlwind tour around London. And Sunday night, sitting in Planet Hollywood in Piccadilly Circus, Barry Dow offered me the job.
So they were recruiting the team before they recruited the coach?
I think Barry was trying to put together players. I think they had already interviewed 2 American coaches at that point in time. And because he had told me about it once I got over there. So I was probably the 3rd person they interviewed. But little to my knowledge, this is how funny and sometimes true stories can be. So I went over and I thought I'd be as comfortable as possible. So I happened to have this new tracksuit that I had just bought recently or just been given recently. It was a Reebok tracksuit, and I still remember it. It was a teal, black, and white Reebok tracksuit. And I wore it on the flight just because it was comfortable. I got off the airplane, and Barry Dow saw me, and he goes, "Oh, my gosh, you're wearing Leopards colors already." So I didn't even know that. I had no idea they were going to be teal and black, but I guess it was meant to be. I got off the plane in a teal and black tracksuit, and I became the first head coach of the London Leopards.
We haven't got all the time in the world to go through your entire time at the Leopards, but from those years you were there, what stands out for you? Because you did have some success.
I thought we had tremendous success. We never. I was there for 5 seasons and a bit, and we never had a losing season. We won in my 3rd year there. We won our first championship. I arrived in 1994. In 1997, we won the double. We started the championships off with winning the National Cup in Sheffield. And then after that, we won the National League for the first time. And then my 4th year there, 1998, we won the National League back-to-back. And I still have framed on my wall here at home a letter that I got from the Minister of Sport from Parliament congratulating me on winning the British Basketball Championship League title back-to-back. We were the first team to do so in 6 years, and the first team to do so in the modern era where every team had at least 5 American players. No one in that modern era had yet won the league title back-to-back. We were the first to do it. So, we won a cup championship. We won 2 league titles. We also played in another cup championship, and at that time lost the closest cup final in cup history. We lost a 1-point game to the Sheffield Sharks, to my good friend Chris Finch. And I still remember to this day, Niall, we were robbed. We were 1 point up late in the ball game, and Terrell Myers was being guarded by Steadroy Baker. And Steady was all over him. And he pushed Steady off with that patented Terrell Myers forearm push and step back to get the space to shoot the shot. He knocked down the game-winning shot, but clearly an offensive foul to create that space. We rushed down the floor trying to get one last shot for Robert Youngblood. Couldn't get it to him. Ben Baum, a young 6'11" English player, took a 3-point attempt from the top of the key that rimmed out, and we lost that final to Sheffield by 1 point. So felt like we should have had a second cup final championship, but working in London, living in London, and sort of the height of the BBL at that time, we were doing interviews every week with the Sun newspaper. We were doing something with the Times in London or the Daily Mail or the Telegraph. We were on Sky Sports every week at the time. And when I wasn't coaching the London Leopards, I was doing studio analysis or play-by-play. Color commentary. Mike Shaft did the play-by-play, and I was one of his color commentators. But it was so much fun. I even had the opportunity to work for many years after leaving England. I would go back in May and June and do studio analysis of the NBA Finals for Sky Sports alongside my good longtime friend Kevin Cadle. So many great memories. And remember, I met my wife in Planet Hollywood in Piccadilly Circus when I was coaching the London Leopards and living on the Isle of Dogs. I met my wife. She was living in Leeds at the time and working for Bass Brewers. I asked her to marry me live on Sky Sports on a night that we beat our crosstown rivals, the London Towers, and I had the ring in my pocket the entire game. So the biggest championship I ever won as the head coach of the London Leopards was my wife said yes that night. And we just celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary. We had 3 beautiful children born in England. 2 were born in Maidstone, and my son Josh was born in Leicester. So great memories of coaching in London, living in London, and my entire career there in the UK.
So, of course, you mentioned just moments ago about Terrell Myers, about a winning shot, and of course, your media stuff. Now, even though you weren't involved in that game, you were on the commentary booth with Daniel Routledge on probably one of the most famous days in BBL history when the Sharks beat the Giants on the last day of the season up in Manchester. What are your memories of that game?
Well, it was a tremendous basketball game. I mean, the Sheffield Sharks, obviously at the time, coached by Chris Finch, who's still active and alive right now in the NBA playoffs. Matter of fact, I'll be watching them tonight, hoping they close out their series against the Golden State Warriors at home in Minneapolis tonight. But I do remember, it was a very, very, very good Sheffield Sharks team. The Manchester Giants, very, very good at that point too. And you looked at that basketball game and you thought, this is big time British basketball. This is basketball on the big stage. It was a regular season game. It was live on Sky Sports. It was a great crowd in attendance at the game, great atmosphere at the game. But the entire country was watching that game to see on the final day of the regular season. When any sport, I mean, in football there in the UK, when the championship goes down to, it could be won by a couple of teams, and it's not decided until the last game on the final day. No, it doesn't get any better in sport than that. So, I mean, everything at stake in that game, every possession mattered, every shot mattered, every decision by both coaches mattered, every timeout. I loved it back then because we used to, we over there, and they've only just started doing it in the NBA. But back then we would mic up the coaches. So every timeout, you got a really front seat row right there in the huddle to listen to the strategy. As a coach myself, there was nothing better than listening to my coaching counterparts and the strategy they were employing to win a big game in their huddle. So I love those things and the atmosphere. And again, even though I sit here and watch the NBA on TNT and ESPN, I'm going to give a shout out to Sky Sports. Their coverage of British basketball during my time there, and then even after, as I would go back and work, as I said, in studio analysis with Kevin for NBA, Sky Sports coverage of basketball, to me, was the best in the world. And I still feel like that. I think they were ahead of the game back in the 90s and early 2000s. So as much as I live in the land of ESPN, I still prefer watching Sky Sports.
Of course, one of the things to me, Billy, that day was you talk about how big that game was in Manchester. Now, as you remember, I was a Thames Valley Tigers fan. But I went up to that game in Manchester. I remember sitting behind one of the baskets. I jumped up when the basket went in. Had a nightmare journey getting there, but it just felt something special. It was one of those things that I thought, I have to be at this game. And, 26 years later, I'm so glad I was, because it's still one of the best moments ever in what was BBL history. Because after 99 was also a period of change for you, and you ended up at the Riders. Now, obviously, Riders struggled at first, but we can't talk about Leicester Riders without talking about 2001. And I'll give you the word to start on, Cinderella.
Well, you had to feel like we were Cinderella for a couple of reasons. When I first took over the Riders, when I first got there, we were 0-18. 0-18. The club had not won a single game. They had a coach that was there, a Canadian coach a very nice gentleman, had coached college basketball in Canada, Tim Darling. And unfortunately, it just wasn't working out for him. And not because he wasn't a good coach. It just wasn't working out. And sometimes that happens. And you talk about moments in my career, and you were asking earlier about the things that I remembered from my days in London with the Leopards and the highlights of that part of my career in the UK. With the Leicester Riders, the thing that I remember the most is probably the very first game I coached there. So before we get to the events of 2001, the very first game I ever coached of the Leicester Riders, I tell you, the script was written by Hollywood, right? It could be a Disney movie if you wanted, one of those sports movies that Disney does such a great job with, like Remember the Titans kind of thing. But the very first game I ever coached for the Leicester Riders was in the old Granby Halls. It was standing room only, packed house to the rafters. And we were playing my former London Leopards. Bob Donewall, who had coached the Leicester Riders previously, was now coaching the London Leopards. I, who had coached the London Leopards, was now coaching the Leicester Riders. And this was my first game in charge of the Riders. They were 0-18, and we hadn't brought in a new player. We didn't have any new players or anything. Took over the exact same team and just put a little passion into them, got them believing in their ability to compete. And once you compete, you have a chance to win. And that day was an amazing game. I remember the reporter from BBC Midlands was down shooting video for the game for the news. And it was incredible while he was trying to interview me after the game, the amount of people that were coming by and patting me on the back, hugging me, and I don't know if I've ever had a championship game feel bigger than that game, that very first game in Granby Halls. Obviously, we won the game. And I remember Pernell Perry had a tremendous game that day. Carl Brown, another one of my former players who had played for me at London Leopards previously. Carl was playing for me with the Riders. He had a tremendous game. 2 or 3 other kids played really, really well. And we just played a great basketball game. And I remember before the game started, as they announced the lineups before the game, every single one of the London Leopards players walked past the scorer's table down to my bench, shook my hand, and gave me a big hug. And that was a special moment, Niall, to see all my former players. It wasn't their choice that I wasn't coaching them anymore, but the love and respect that we still had for each other, it was a very special moment. And then to go on and win that game, to me, that was a championship. Now, we finished that season out winning 10 of the last 18. So I got in there, it was 36 games in the league back then. I was mid-season. It was December. We were 0-18. Over the last 18, we went 10-8. And that's when I felt like the charge toward 2001 began. So 2001, before we got to winning the cup, which was the first trophy that the Leicester Riders had ever won in the 36-year history at the top level of British basketball for their club. They had been in some finals, but had been unlucky, and they had never collected silverware at the top level of British basketball. So for me, it was a goal because I thought there was a great fan base there in Leicester, and I wanted those fans to have the opportunity, Niall, to realize what everybody should have a chance to at some point, what it's like to win championship silverware, to one day stand tall and be the best of the best. So that was my goal from the day that I got there. And ironically, when we played for that first championship that we won, the National Cup final in Sheffield, guess who the opponent was?
Well, I know it was the Leopards. I was there, Billy.
I'm telling you, Niall, is that not a Hollywood script? Now, we had already beaten them in my very first game, head-to-head, and now we're going to take them on the following year in the Cup final and a chance to claim the first silverware for this proud club in their 36-year British basketball top flight history. And I know all the build up to the Cup final, Sky Sports was having a ball with it. They were having a blast. The Donawall Mims rivalry, Leopards, Leicester, the two coaches flipping the script, one who'd been the previous flamboyant coach of Leicester, now taking over the Leopards, one who had led the Leopards to their first championship as a BBL side, now taking over the Riders. So they were having a blast. And I remember in the pregame, Donawall had been on camera saying they weren't just going to win the game, they were going to destroy us. And obviously, we had every bit of the motivation necessary. On that Riders team, I had a team of five superstars, Niall. And I can list them off to you again like it was yesterday. But, and I felt like these were five outcasts, guys who had played for other teams, but nobody wanted them anymore. I had Carl Brown, who had played for the London Leopards, who had played for Kingston back in the day, who had played for the London Towers. So Carl had bounced around and ended up back home in Leicester, kind of because he'd burned enough bridges or, just other teams just felt like he was beyond his sell-by date. So he ended up back in Leicester, his hometown, with something to prove. Then you had Larry Johnson, on one of the best guards I've ever coached in my pro coaching career. And he played for me at the Leopards. And after I left the Leopards and Bob Donawall came in, the Leopards got rid of Larry Johnson. So he had something to prove. You had Ralph Blaylock, and Ralph Blaylock had been a tremendous player for the Newcastle Eagles. But things didn't work out. He went to another country. He went to Europe. It didn't work out. And Ralph wanted to come back to the UK. We brought him in. So again, he was released by a club that didn't want him. We picked him up. Then we had Malcolm Leake, one of the most flamboyant players in the BBL, had played for the London Towers. And the Towers didn't want him anymore. So we picked him up. And then we had Billy Singleton, who had bounced around multiple clubs and had been at Leicester before, and then bounced around several other clubs since then. Probably had his most success when he was playing with the Chester Jets. But again, he was unwanted, without a job. We picked him up. It felt like we had five guys that at some point had been BBL all-star players. But Niall, for 2001, they felt like castaways. And we felt like that we could put that mix together because they all had something to prove, along with myself, and it could be a special campaign. So when we won the Cup final in Sheffield that day, two stories come to mind now. On the bus that day, I can remember our bus driver like it was yesterday, a guy named Mick Jelly. And, we were sponsored by a national coach company. So he was driving one of their buses, and they had already had the bus rebranded and had the Riders logo and my signature on the side of the bus. And we were on our way to Sheffield with Mick Jelly behind the wheel. I'm sitting in the front seat up to his left, and he and I are having a nice conversation just about life. And it was a beautiful, sunny day. Looked like I was in Florida, but I was in England. It was a beautiful, sunny day. And I remember just outside Sheffield on the M1, I looked over to my left, and there was one of those M1 motorway signs that said how far it was. I can't, for the life of me, remember exactly whether it was Sheffield 8 or Sheffield 9 or Sheffield 6. Whatever it was, we were getting close. And say it was 9, it said Sheffield 9 miles, right? I looked at the sign and I looked at Mick Jelly. I said, Mick, you know what that says? He said, oh, it says Sheffield's 9 miles away. I said, no, Mick, it says we're 9 miles away from destiny. I said, this today is our destiny. So I remember that like it was yesterday. And Mick, years later, emailed me and he said, Coach, he said, may we always be 9 miles from destiny. Was a great driver, great friend. And then we won the game. And at the end of the game, Bob got so upset, he took his microphone off and slammed it to the floor. He broke his microphone. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I was told that the Leopards Club had to pay thousands of dollars for the replacement of the microphone that he broke. So it was an unhappy ending for them, win-loss wise. Probably an expensive ending for them as well, since they didn't win and they had a pretty big bill to pay for the broken headset and microphone. But I don't know if you can remember or not. When we won the game, I ran out onto the floor, and this is my one moment of true fame in British basketball. This moment, Niall, was captured years later. I saw it on A Question of Sport. So it had to be a big moment for Gary Lineker to bring it up on A Question of Sport. But I ran out onto the court. Carl Brown jumped up into my arms, and we fell onto the floor with Carl right on top of me. And we looked at each other. I'm lying on my back on the court at Sheffield Arena. Players are jumping on top of Carl. It's becoming a player pile on top of me. And the cameras are getting right in there on it. I looked at Carl. Carl looked at me. And don't ask me why. I kissed him. I kissed him smack on the lips. And we both just had shared this moment of incredible joy. Over in America, there used to be a program called The Wide World of Sports. You ever hear of it?
No.
It was a weekly sports show on ABC, national sports program called The Wide World of Sports. And in their intro every week to the program, they'd have this collection of clips from sports all around the world and from great sports moments. And in that collection, Niall, they would always say in that clip, you know, the moderator, the announcer would say, the thrill of victory. And there'd be some great scenes of winning, right? And then he would say, and the agony of defeat. And then there'd be some moments of defeat, right? So I remember that. And when I was lying on my back on the floor and all those players were jumping on top of me, I remembered that. This is the thrill of victory. But in one moment, I experienced the thrill of victory and the agony of victory because Billy Singleton jumped onto the top of the pile. And I think when Billy jumped on the pile, now I believe I cracked 3 ribs. So there was such a thrill in victory, but I can tell you, there can also be agony in victory if Billy Singleton jumps on top of you.
Well, do you know what? I've got somewhere some of the old Tip-Off magazine archives. So if I can find a picture relating to that moment, then I shall use that when we do the podcast. That was just a great day. Like I said, you said it's the first trophy in the league. You know, you weren't doing too great, but then you went on that run in the playoffs to reach Wembley and take on the Sharks for the playoff title. And I want to talk about playoffs obviously because Leicester Riders are in the playoffs again this weekend.
That's right.
Go for another championship. Of course, back then it never happened. What do you remember of that playoff run?
Well, I do remember this because at the beginning of the year, we were up and down. There's no doubt about it. We were up and down. But remember, we had brought in all these new players. And initially, we had the same guys I talked to you about, but we didn't have Ralph Blaylock. Initially, we brought in a young American guard from Bethune-Cookman named Freddie Cole. And I really liked Freddie. Great kid. He was a great athlete, great shooter. We got him, and I was happy having him on our team. We went to Belfast in Northern Ireland preseason with that team intact to try and develop those guys, right? Played in a big tournament in a place called Newtown Abbey. It was the Millennium, because it was the year 2000 at that time, the Millennium Basketball Tournament in Newtown Abbey, Belfast. And we played great, Niall. We won the tournament, blew everybody away. Freddie Cole had an incredible tournament. Probably averaged 25, 30 points a game for us in that tournament in Belfast. So we thought, man, this is going to be it. This is a great team. Then as we got back and started playing in the BBL, Freddie was a rookie. He was a young kid fresh out of college. And I guess maybe didn't know how to take care of his body and his sort of celebrity stardom at such an early point. He was burning the candle maybe at both ends a little too much. And his statistics started to fall down and got a little worse and worse and worse. And all of a sudden, we weren't getting anything out of him. And it was sort of the one spot that we felt like when we were losing early games, we just felt like we weren't getting something out of our backcourt. And that was supposed to be Freddie. That was the exact same moment I got a phone call from Ralph Blaylock. So as much as I hated to do it, you know, it's pro basketball, it's professional sport. You have to make tough decisions. I mean, the Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Doncic this year, you know? So we decided to make a change. We got rid of Freddie Cole and we brought in Ralph Blaylock. Now, let me tell you something about that. And this is what the historians have to go back and see. But I kept telling people it was no surprise that we were capable of winning the playoff final, because even though we finished up in 8th place in the league regular season and became, if not the first, certainly one of the first 8th place teams to ever win the BBL championship. I think maybe Alan Cunningham and Worthing had done it once before us. So it was a very rare thing to see an 8th place team win it all. And when we got to the 8th place and we got into the playoffs, everybody thought I was crazy saying, we have a chance to win this thing. We're going to be pretty good. And people kept saying, no, you're 8th place. How can you do this? But I'll tell you the facts, that once Ralph Blaylock joined our team, from that moment on, we were the winningest team in the BBL that year. We actually won down the stretch. I want to say we were like 18-5 down the stretch. And that was definitely over the last 3 months of the season, the best record by far, right? But from the time Ralph Blaylock joined our team, we were the best team in the BBL. And so it didn't shock me at all. And we had something in our favor too. The first 2 rounds of it were being played at the Coventry Sky Dome.
Yeah.
That was a stone from Leicester. I mean, the entire city of Leicester traveled over to Coventry to support us. Again, one of the greatest fan bases in BBL history, the Leicester Rider fan base. Unbelievable. And they came to Coventry, to the Sky Dome, and really supported our team. So, you know, I remember we knocked off Milton Keynes. The only close game we had in the playoffs was that first game to Nigel Lloyd and his Milton Keynes team. And it took a late bucket for us. I think we won by 2. I remember it was a low scoring game for us, and it was a really, really close game. And we knocked off Milton Keynes. And that was the only close game in those playoffs. And then after that, we played the Chester Jets. And the Jets at the time had an ex-NBA player on the team, Lauren Meyer. They were really a strong team that year. and we beat the Jets pretty solid. It wasn't really a close game. We beat them pretty soundly. And then after the Jets, we had to play the London Towers and Nick Nurse. And of course, Malcolm Leak really wanted to beat his old team, the London Towers. And we put it on them pretty good. But it was such a great second half performance, fourth quarter performance by our team in putting London away. I can remember one moment that I have a clip of it somewhere because it just stands out in memory. I said he was a flamboyant BBL player, but I remember Malcolm Leak getting fouled late in that game, looking at the London Towers bench, right? And he sinks 2 free throws. But after he makes the second free throw, he gives them a show of the bicep and how strong he is, how strong. He goes down on the court at the top of the key where he's just shot the free throw and does 2 push-ups and then jumps up and runs back to play defense, laughing at their bench. And, you know, again, as coaches, sometimes you don't like guys to showboat to an extent. But I believe the professional game is all about entertainment. And as you watch the NBA now, they've gotten more and more lenient on allowing, you know, celebrations and entertainment. But that night when Malcolm Leak did that in the Coventry Sky Dome, I thought, let him have fun. They didn't want him anymore, and he just proved to them they should have kept him. So we had a great run up to the championship, which, you know, took place in Wembley. And I felt like all along we had a chance to get there and we had a chance to win it.
I say good memory because I was just looking at the BBL handbook. It's useless for a audio podcast, but I'm showing you on the camera. So my 2001, 2002 BBL handbook, which I've kept all these years. I keep the old handbooks. I love them. Yes, so you won by 2 points against Milton Keynes. You beat Chester by 21, and then you beat London Towers by 8. Now, let's bring you on to Wembley and the final. We'll talk about the game in a moment, but I also want to bring up one moment in the game. I'm sure you know what the question's going to be, and I just want to get what you were thinking when Carl Brown went down injured and had to be stretched off. What was going through your mind at that point? Because as you said, you ran a small roster on that team. What was going through your mind when Carl Brown got injured in the final?
Well, to be totally honest, the first thing I thought is if Carl can't come back, we might only play 5. We were at that time, we were playing 6 guys. And everybody kept saying to me, why don't you use your whole bench? Well, we had 4 guys down on our bench that were basically young kids. And you know, they were either just out of high school or just out of college. They were really young, inexperienced players. And so we were really only playing 1 sub, and we would rotate around. That 1 sub would come in. Now, that 1 sub was going to play, you know, 20, 25 minutes a game for us because he was subbing for 5 different guys at different times. But when Carl went down, the first thought in my mind was, can Billy Singleton last the entire game? Because at the time that Carl went down, I don't believe I had gotten Billy a blow yet. So thinking, can Billy go the entire game? I believe I shouted at our physio on the bench, can we get an oxygen tank for Billy because he's going to need it?
Obviously, that moment, and then you went on, because obviously Sharks were heavily favoured to win the final that day, but you went on and beat them. What was the difference between the 2 teams that day? What was the thing that got you over the line to beat Chris Finch's Sharks?
Well, Chris had a great team. That was a really, really good Sheffield Sharks. They were the number 1 team in the league that year, and I thought they deserved to be the number 1 team in the league. Chris did an outstanding job coaching them, and you can see he's still doing an outstanding job today in the NBA. I think it shows you the quality of the BBL back then. Look, I mean, in the late 90s, early 2000s, you know, we had a lot of great players in the league, but 2 of those coaches in the league at that time are coaching in the NBA now. Nick is with the Philadelphia 76ers. Nick has already won an NBA championship with the Toronto Raptors. Chris is doing a great job with the Minnesota Timberwolves, about to make his second consecutive Western Conference final. And there's a good chance that if Chris can knock off Oklahoma City, Chris could be the second BBL coach to win an NBA championship, because I think his team right now is playing as well as anybody in the league. And when you look at who they're going to face from the East, well, the 1 and 2 seeds might be gone from the East. So he's just got to get past the 1 seed in the West to get it done. And I think he's capable of that. And I really think that Minnesota are very close to being a potential NBA champion this year if they stay healthy and a little luck goes their way. So you look at that season, there were a lot of great coaches, a lot of great players in the BBL. And I think back then we were a little spoiled. People just assumed this is what it is. But that was a really great period of time in British basketball. So we knew we were taking on the best team in the league. And in answer to your question, Niall, I felt like we had momentum. We had momentum. And the pressure was all on them. They're the number 1 seed. We're the number 8 seed going into the final at Wembley. And, it's going to be on national television, and the whole country are going to be watching. And it's going to be a standing room only, huge crowd of thousands. I think we had 10 buses from Leicester come down to London to go to the game. And on that same day, there was a home Leicester football match. I think Welford Road had a Tigers rugby match on that day. And even still, 10 busloads of sports fans, and even the Lord Mayor of Leicester got on a bus and came to Wembley to support the Leicester Riders in that final that day. So we had a crowd in our favor, we had momentum in our favor, and we had no pressure on us to win. All the pressure was on the Sharks. So pressure and momentum and that crowd, that support from those faithful sporting fans in the city of Leicester, those are the 3 things I think that gave us an edge in that championship game.
In that Sheffield game, is it right you gave them a little memorable halftime speech in the locker room?
Memorable to say the least. I've always been the positive motivator. My wife is English. I'm American, and we have a great relationship. But she'll be the first to tell you that being English, her glass is always half empty. Being American, my glass is always 3/4 full. We were trailing by 8 points, and we're the 8th seed. They're the number 1 seed. We're down 8 as we walk off the court at Wembley. Carl Brown is being wheeled off in a wheelchair with his knee in a brace. We're going into the locker room there at Wembley Arena, and I walk in the door and I see all these faces, heads hanging, frowns on faces, dejected, like we've lost the game. And I said, there's a couple of ways I can go at this. And I said, I'm going to be Billy Mims. I'm going to be that positive Pied Piper, that motivator. And I walked into that locker room and I looked at him. I walked into the center, and then I circled around the room. And I said, pick those faces up. Start smiling. We got them right where we want them. You realize, guys, they are the number 1 seed. We're the number 8 seed. The whole world believes they're going to win the game. And you know what? The guys in the other locker room right now, 8 up at the half, believe they're going to win the game. The guys in this locker room are the only people on the planet that know we're going to win the game. We have them right where we want them. Man, all of a sudden the spirits lifted. We said a few more things. We talked about the things we were doing right, some adjustments we needed to make. I joked with Billy Singleton and I said, Billy, don't worry. You got the 20 in you. I know you do. But just in case, I'll call as many timeouts as you need, and I've got an oxygen tank behind the bench. Everybody laughs, and we take that court smiling, Niall. And then I remember when we had the game won, and we have turned it around. In the third quarter, Ralph Blaylock and Larry Johnson went to work. We went from 8 down to like 8 up. And the rest of the fourth quarter, we just kept our lead and kept playing solid. One of the last timeouts in the game, I remember looking at those guys, and I was mic'd up and the cameras were on me. And I'll never forget, I just stopped coaching for a minute. And I looked at them and I said, no BBL All-Star, no BBL Player of the Month, no BBL Coach of the Month. I said, but today you're going to become the Team of the Year. And that was what that timeout was. We had gotten no credit for everything we'd achieved up to that point. But we said, tonight, here at Wembley, we're going to make history and we're going to be the Team of the Year.
I think that is the perfect moment to end this interview on. Listen, Billy, it's been so great to get you on today. I'm so glad we've been able to look back on this journey, and I wish you all the best for whatever you do next. And I'll be keeping an eye and I'll be keeping in touch to see where you end up. And like I said, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Niall. And hopefully I see you in the UK real soon.
And finally, if you're enjoying what we do, please make sure to like, subscribe, or even share the pod on your social media. Every little bit of support helps. Until next time, my name's Niall Gray. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Eurostep Brit podcast, a Hoops and Hockey production.